Alright, let's talk about the Super Bowl with Fletch going after Deebo following the loss, and AJ Brown's comments on Travis's sideline altercation, or maybe it wasn't AJ. Plus, the latest around Jason Kelce, while the Eagles shared more about what they want from Jalen Hurts, and why Haason Reddick being traded may not be the worst thing. But first, let's run it. How about that Super Bowl? I mean, it really felt like the Niners were going to do it early on. What with the lack of offensive creativity from the Chiefs, and San Fran just seemed to have the momentum. But I guess I should have known because it's a tradition unlike any other, in that they'll find a way to choke it away and resort to being the 40-winers. Like, it's pretty impressive how Kyle Shanahan's teams have now blown a 25-point lead in Super Bowl 51, 10-point lead in Super Bowl 54, and another 10-point lead last night.
I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
You know, as happy as they were to watch the Eagles lose against the Cardinals in the regular season, I was even happier to see the choke artist come up short again. But get ready, because like Jimmy Kimsky said, the 49ers are about to spend the next 6 months lobbying to change OT rules back to when opening drive field goals could win the game. Actually, though, it's really just that Shanahan had no clue what he was doing, saying after the game that they elected to take the ball to start overtime so they would be assured the ball should the game have been tied after the first 2 possessions, since it would be sudden death at that point.
What an idiot.
Okay, so the best part is that apparently his team felt the same way because they weren't aware of the OT rules and they admitted that they never practiced that regularly.
Hello? You play to win the game.
They may be one of the most excruciating, painful losses in 49ers franchise history.
Bay Area sports history.
Bay Area sports history.
Is it childish of me to be enjoying it this much? Especially given the fact that it's been 27 years since either the Winers or Dallas has won a Super Bowl. I mean, Fletch was loving it too, considering the fact that he called out Deebo after the game to remind him that he and the Birds have a Super Bowl ring, while Deebo does not. Just for that alone, Fletch needs to be brought back next season. Although if you just go with the headlines, you'd think 91's wanting to join the Steelers by naming Cam Hayward as the guy he would have liked to play with, yet the actual interview doesn't seem as serious.
You?
I was going to say, it's Cam Hayward's podcast.
I love it. I love the honestly.
He set himself up.
That's the truth.
Appreciate that, brother.
Definitely you.
Appreciate that, brother. That's love.
Just the both, like, the respect that you got for the game, respect that I have for the game, the way that you play the game, the way that I play the game, like, definitely, that would have been nice.
Okay, that's cool. And again, this is a reminder of why you watch the interview versus just read the clippings from it or interview notes or things like that, because context is very important. Worth pointing out that Fletch also hinted at it being unlikely he'll return to the league, but you never know. Of course, the dude we all want to know about is the GOAT Jason Kelce, with the latest report being that the Eagles legend has been meeting with ESPN and Fox about getting into the TV booth. Obviously not a stretch, since Kelce looks comfortable in just about any setting. And it'd also be kind of funny since Tony Romo could apparently be getting a little bit of competition if Jason decides to go that route, with sources saying CBS is interested.
I've got to do the news!
Look, I know his wife Kylie said he'd be good at anything. By the way, shout out to her for not repping any other NFL team. But take a look at Jason's eyes in the Chiefs post-game celebration and tell me he's not coming back to stop little bro from a three-peat. I don't know, maybe it's just wishful thinking. Either way, Philly wants Jalen Hurts to be more like Kelce and get more vocal.
Eagle!
Do we have, what did you say? Super Bowl, what she said? You sound drunk and like you're a football fan.
Okay, well, maybe not that vocal to yell at an Adele concert, yet according to Mike Garafolo, a part of that is true, saying the Eagles want QB1 to be more front-facing and more of a vocal leader, and that the sides have already been having those conversations. Garafolo also said that the Birds felt like Jalen took a step by showing more of his personality at the Pro Bowl. Again, I've said it before, but we didn't really hear a whole lot about this 2 seasons ago. Granted, yes, last year was a not-so-fun season, and there was a lot of pressure and everything else building up. Plus, I think we all agree that winning cures all, but how big of a deal is this really? Speaking of speaking up, the viral clip of Andy Reid getting shoved by Travis Kelce caused quite the stir. However, maybe not as much for Eagles Twitter until AJ Brown returned to Twitter saying, "If that was me, I would have been kicked out of the league," to which Slay and a lot of people agreed. And say what you will about it being a fair point, seeing how a lot of people freaked out at AJ's sideline emotions, but apparently that wasn't even AJ, with the poser coming back to say he's just a fan and doesn't want to get him in trouble with what he says. Oh yeah, and Slay checked in on Swole Batman with a story checking out, followed by the dude then asking for a signed jersey to give AJ back his page. And I'm guessing he got his ransom because the account's now deactivated again.
That wasn't me. That wasn't me.
I have no clue what to think. I mean, it's not really a big deal, just kind of funny because it really did seem like AJ, and I definitely fell for it if it wasn't him. Now, the for sure guarantee is that AJ's back in that hunting mode.
The hunt is on. No matter if you running or you hunting, you better be running. A new season.
Say what you will about all that other stuff, but 11's coming back next season. He's too good, and there's so many reasons that you keep one of your best players on the team. Wait, we might be getting rid of Haason Reddick, though. After Ian Rappaport shared, the Birds are allowing the 29-year-old to seek a trade with another team. And I think just about all of us don't want to see Haas go. Yet it does make some sense when looking back at training camp last season.
Are you underpaid? Say it again. Are you underpaid? Man, I ain't going to say her. I mean, like I said, y'all see it. Y'all know what's going on. Like I said, I'm worried about being the best version of myself and letting everything else sort itself out. True.
All right, curious to get y'all's take. And I also had Anthony DiBona of Outside DiBirds hop on to provide additional insight on all the ramifications. Hearing the news from Ian Rappaport, what was your takeaway?
Initially, I wasn't really surprised, to be honest. I feel like I've mentioned it a couple of times how edge was kind of an underrated need because both Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat are heading into the final year of their current contract. So they basically are going to have to decide one or the other or neither. So we'll see about that. But I mean, Haason Reddick is obviously the better player of the two. So it's not a surprise to see them kind of shop him and see what happens. Because to me, I think I mentioned it on Twitter as well, is you're just going to, we've seen this happen with literally Darius Slay last season and Derek Barnett as well. Whenever there's this whole permission to seek trade, it's pretty much, hey, you want to get paid? Then go find a team that'll pay you that, and then we'll try and figure out a deal. But if he tries to find the trade and no team is offering him either more than what the Eagles are maybe offering or whatever the case might be, then we'll just see him probably return and play out his contract. Or if a team is willing to pay, because there are a ton of teams that'll probably be lining up for his services, so then they have to figure out the trade compensation and whatnot. So it's not really surprising. I think it makes sense, but now we'll see what happens.
It feels like it's either going to be him traded or restructuring, get an extension done. To me, going into this, do you have a, I guess, prediction? I'll put you on the spot, I suppose, but a prediction of where you think this thing might go. Do you feel like it's more likely that he does get traded, and are there suitors for him? Or I guess there are, but does he get what he wants money-wise and not get paid by Howie? Or is there some way or line of thinking that you feel like he might get a contract done?
I mean, this could very well just be posturing kind of from his agent, especially given that it's literally the day of the Super Bowl. I don't think that's a coincidence. It could just be that, his agent trying to pressure him and pressure Howie Roseman into giving them something that they want. But I also think there is a strong chance that a deal will get done. And I honestly, if I had to guess right now, I think he does get traded, because just given what the Eagles have to do, I think at the top of their list should be extensions for Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. I feel like that should be their main priority this offseason. And we've seen Howie Roseman kind of work a year in advance with the way he drafts players and whatnot. Because if you look back at the 2023 draft now, they picked Jalen Carter, who's going to have a bigger role now because obviously Fletcher Cox might be moving on or whatever the case will be there. Then now he picked Nolan Smith. And at the time, everybody was like, oh, that doesn't really make sense right away. And now if they're moving on from Reddick, then obviously he'll play a bigger role. I would assume they would add somebody else as well there. But then you look at Tyler Steen, and now you see Jason Kelce might be retiring. So now Cam Jurgens is going to slide over, and that right guard spot is an option for him there. And then Keely Ringo, obviously James Bradbury or Darius Slay. Probably Bradbury won't be there next season. So Howie Roseman kind of always moves one step ahead, or at least he tries to. It doesn't always work. But I think if I had to guess right now, Reddick is probably going to be traded.
I'm sadly, I think, with you. I think emotional ties on my side, I'm like, and I don't think really anyone would want to see him go if you could just pick and choose, because being a Philly native and what he's meant to this team, obviously the productivity and everything else. But yeah, I'm kind of right there with you, unfortunately. If you had to say the potential value of a trade for Haason Reddick, if you're going to go out there and look at, hey, what does the market bring? What potentially could Howie Roseman get with a draft pick? What a team might be able to give up? Do you have a, I guess, best guess or, past outcomes, what you've seen there?
My guess is it'd probably be similar to the return that the Commanders got from Montez Sweat, which, I mean, granted, it was at the trade deadline. We've seen a lot of other edge rushers over the past 3 years get traded at the trade deadline. So this is a little bit of a different situation. But I would guess like a second-round pick at best, as far as like the biggest asset in a potential trade would make sense, because, I mean, last year Sweat was traded for a second-round pick at the deadline. In 2022, Bradley Chubb was traded for a first-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and Chase Edmonds, but that was also at the trade deadline. He also had 1 year remaining on his rookie contract, so that makes a bit of a difference, and he was obviously younger than Reddick. And then the year before that, in 2021, when the Rams went all in at the trade deadline, they traded a second and a third-round pick for Von Miller, who was actually older than Reddick is right now. But I feel like that was kind of a different case where a team was going all in. And like I said, the trade deadline, teams get a little bit more panicky and more willing to give up bigger assets. So ideally, I think the best case scenario is like a second round pick as the biggest asset, and then maybe a player or another day 3 pick or something like that.
Cap wise, I mean, what are we talking about in terms of, just freeing up more space? Do you see them utilizing that in a specific area? I guess the next natural question too would be, how do you replace Haason Reddick? But just in general, where do you see that with the cap?
So cap wise, the numbers, I think according to Spot Track, was pre-June 1st, the Eagles basically don't save anything. It's kind of like a rough situation for them, which is basically what it would have to be in order to get compensation in this year's draft, I believe. So right now, if he's traded before June 1st, they would take a $20.6 million dead cap hit in 2024, and it would only save them basically $700,000 against the cap. If they do it after June 1st, they'll save $15.5 million this year, but they'll take a $14.7 million hit next year and a $5.8 million hit this year. So, I mean, they're taking a hit regardless, but that's what we've seen a couple of reporters say that the Eagles need this to work both in compensation and cap-wise. So my guess is they're going to try to restructure his contract in some way where it makes it easier to trade him. Maybe the other team that's inheriting his contract is going to pay some of the contract or whatever the case might be. Or maybe he'll even agree to the extension and then get traded. I don't know how exactly that would work, but they're definitely going to try and make it to where they're getting some type of notable asset, probably a day 2 pick, and then not taking that $20 million cap hit this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that's worked, but I mean, we've seen Howie Roseman do crazier things before, so if anybody can get it done, it's probably him.
That is the beauty. Yes, we do know that Howie can work his magic, even if he hasn't hit all of them. But like you say, there's a potential option on that side. Speaking of Howie and working his magic too, so again, let's say you get some cap space freed up. You do make the trade. There's not a lot of depth, I'm going to say, and you mentioned this earlier, but everyone realized there's not a whole lot of depth when it comes to the edge rusher, especially long term. I mean, we look at, if BG comes back, he probably will. He wants a farewell tour. He'll probably take a team-friendly deal, all that. But it's just one season, and who knows how much productivity we could have from BG on that side too. So even if he does, I mean, you got Nolan Smith, you got Josh Sweat, you got BG, and what is it? Patrick Johnson, I think, is the other. Is that the only other? Yeah. I believe. So you got to get somebody. You mentioned a couple times, I know Andrew Van Ginkel. There's other options too, but who is your best or maybe most likely you think Howie would go after or help in with Fangio bringing to the defense?
I mean, I think I've been saying it all along, even before this rumor, but Van Ginkel makes the most sense because, I mean, he literally just had his best year of his career in the one season that Vic Fangio was there. So I feel like he put up really good numbers in that one season. He might not cost at the top of the market as far as edge rushers in free agency. So if you can kind of trade Haason Reddick for a day 2 pick, even if you don't save much money against the cap, you could probably sign Van Ginkel for like a 2-3 year deal for probably a fraction of what Reddick is going to be making on his new deal, where that'll end up looking like a steal again in a couple of years. So, I mean, it's easy to project because he's going into a system that he basically played in last season. And I feel like it's always good to kind of have somebody with that familiarity with the scheme. So getting kind of an edge rusher that you know can fit, that you know can help Nolan Smith and Josh Sweat develop in the system as well, I feel like it's a no-brainer. I mean, there's plenty of other options in the draft that we might get into, but that they've already shown interest in as far as edge rushers go. But as far as free agency, I feel like Van Ginkel is an obvious choice to fit for Philadelphia's plans moving forward.
There you go. And also just a disclaimer too, because I saw this on Twitter of people that are commenting back or going back at you. You're not saying Andrew Van Ginkel is Haason Reddick. So we're being completely clear with that. But yes, for a great option, I like it too. I like the fact that Van Ginkel has played with Fangio, familiar with it, had a career year like you're talking about. What was it? I think, was it 30%? He did something like 30% drop back in coverage. So not that we would want to have him, drop back into coverage that much, but he's familiar with it. So he can run the Fangio scheme. So again, the versatility, all the things you mentioned there, I do like the positive on that side. Real quick, I got to ask you about Nolan Smith too, because there's certainly ramifications for everyone, but you drafted Nolan Smith like Howie does, thinking ahead, possibility of having to replace an edge rusher or two. It's kind of an up and down. Nolan's shoulder injury maybe needs to add a little bit more strength. Weight-wise is probably okay because he's basically the same size as Haason Reddick there, but just has to add a few things as well as, just kind of refining and not being quite as raw. I think Fangio can teach him quite a bit, but where do you see Nolan Smith? Do you believe he can take that next step this season? And you know, how much kind of stepping up to that next level, playing a lot more snaps?
I mean, ideally, you don't want to force him as a starter like they kind of did with Nakobe Dean last year, where they just like ignored linebacker and they're like, oh no, he's going to start, he's going to do great, and then you saw what happened. So I mean, ideally, I think you'd want him as like your third rusher, but behind, say, a Josh Sweat and a Van Ginkel or even a BG, if all three of them were there. So he would be your fourth technically, or whatever the case might be. So I feel like having him where he's still kind of a rotational edge rusher, because we saw Fangio, even in Miami, kind of use a rotation there. So he would almost play like the Van Ginkel role that he did last year before they suffered injuries, and he wasn't like a full-time edge rusher where he was able to just rotate and kind of dominate in a little bit of lesser snaps. So I feel like a bigger role than he had as a rookie, but I wouldn't expect him to be a full-time starter. So maybe somewhere in that 20 to 30 snap range where he could just come in, rush the passer, and Fangio will kind of use him in different roles, either blitzing from like a off-ball linebacker standpoint, not necessarily always on the edge. But I feel like Smith is the kind of athlete that you can kind of use in that versatile position, I guess.
I think the key is being patient with Nolan Smith. I've kept seeing, you know, like, hey, Nolan's a bust. He's not going to make it, whatever. It's like, come on. It's just 1 year now. Even next season, still be a little bit patient. There's a lot of potential with him. And you know, like we see with several people, like even Reddick to where he is now, he didn't have that beginning and starting his career. Now he was, you know, not utilized in the best ways and put in other positions before they say, hey, you know what, let's get you to rush the passer. But still, I think it's a case in point for a lot of players. Get them in the right fit. Don't rush it. Be patient. You saw the potential with him. You know, it can turn out and be promising. So at least that's what I'm holding on to. Again, huge Nolan Smith supporter. So we'll see. The other question, last question here for you. On the flip side of that, the other edge rusher, the main starter on that sense is Josh Sweat. So where are you at with Sweat? Because I've seen kind of very polarizing on both sides. You know, some people that are saying like, hey, Josh Sweat was better than he, you know, really looked on paper. Other people that are saying Josh Sweat, the knee, something caused the issues there on that side. The defense was terrible regardless. We all know that. Like the defense was awful at the end of the season. However, there's still some potential, I believe, with Josh Sweat, but where do you fall on, you know, especially if Josh Sweat, I mean, essentially would become your number one pass rusher? Is that doable? Does he still have a lot left in the tank? Is there a reason to be optimistic? Where are you at?
I still feel like he's a pretty damn good pass rusher. I mean, you might not ideally want him as your top guy, but if you add like Van Ginkel or another player, a player high in the draft or whatever the case might be, I feel like Sweat fits in fine. He makes a reasonable amount of money, so he's not really demanding a new contract yet. So in my opinion, I would just kind of let Sweat play out his contract, see how he does this season. I wouldn't rush to extend him if you trade away Reddick. I feel like just let him play, and then if he plays really well, then you can give him a contract. You can address it then. But I feel like he actually led the team in total pressures last year. He had 70 pressures, which is top 20 in the NFL. So, I mean, a lot of people were like, oh, he fell off. He didn't do anything in the second half. Who on the defense did anything in the second half of the regular season? So, I mean,
it's a good question.
It's a bit silly to me to kind of like just throw Sweat under the bus and say that he fell off or he's mid or whatever people are saying on Twitter. It just drives me crazy because I feel like he played pretty well. Sure, he struggled at the end of the year, but so did everybody else. So, I mean, it was kind of just unfortunate circumstances. I'm willing to give him another year. Like I said, focus on extending Devontae Smith and Dickerson and take care of those guys and then see what happens with Sweat. So I think he's still good. I wouldn't panic about him just yet. And then just see what happens.
How are we feeling? Because the offseason is about to get really busy. Okay, seriously, shout out to you guys for getting the channel over 45,000 subscribers. So gonna do a giveaway pretty soon. Keep an eye out. This has been the Philly Special.